Imagine this moment. You're standing in a conversation that suddenly feels heavier than it should. Someone challenges you, questions you, pushes against something you believe. Your mind starts racing. Your chest tightens. You prepare your response, not to understand, but to defend. You feel the urge to speak immediately, to explain, to correct, to win, and right there, something subtle happens. Your power begins to drain. Most people never notice this moment. They think power lives in sharp words, fast replies, clever arguments. They believe dominance means speaking louder, faster, harder. But there is an older truth most never learn. The moment you feel compelled to respond, you're no longer in control. Silence has a bad reputation. It's mistaken for weakness, for fear, for submission. But silence, when chosen, not forced, is something else entirely. It is restraint, and restraint is power. Think about it. Why do arguments escalate so quickly? Because both sides feel threatened. Not intellectually, but emotionally. Very few arguments are about truth. They are about identity. When someone disagrees with you, it feels like they're attacking who you are, not just what you think. Your beliefs become extensions of your self-worth. So defending an idea feels like defending your existence. That's why logic collapses in arguments. Because ego takes control, and whoever controls your emotions controls you. This is the trap most people live inside. They believe reacting is strength, but reaction is always surrender. True strength begins before the reaction. Look closely at the people who carry real authority. They don't rush to speak. They don't interrupt. They don't explain themselves endlessly. They observe. They let others talk themselves into corners. They allow silence to stretch just long enough to make people uncomfortable. Because discomfort reveals truth, silence forces people to fill the space, and when they do, they expose their motivations, their insecurities, their need for validation. Words are revealing. Silence is strategic. Most people talk to assert control. The powerful remain quiet until control is already theirs. This isn't about never speaking. It's about choosing when to speak. There is a difference between expression and compulsion. If you speak because you feel pushed, pressured, provoked, you're being led. If you speak because you decide the moment is right, you are leading. That difference changes everything. Think back to the last argument you had. Did you feel calm or did you feel urgency? Urgency is a signal. It means something inside you feels threatened, and threats create noise. The quieter you are inside, the fewer words you need outside. Most people confuse confidence with volume, but real confidence doesn't announce itself. It waits. It lets others overextend. It understands that attention is currency and doesn't spend it cheaply. Silence does something unsettling to the average person. It removes feedback, no reassurance, no resistance, no validation. And without those, people become unsure of themselves. They talk more. They exaggerate. They justify. They reveal. That's why silence often feels so uncomfortable, especially in tense moments. Because silence is a mirror, and many people don't like what they see when they're left alone with their thoughts. The disciplined mind understands this. It knows that not every challenge deserves a response. Not every accusation deserves a defense. Not every misunderstanding deserves clarification. Some things lose power the moment you refuse to engage with them. That refusal isn't avoidance, it's selection. Energy is finite. Every argument you enter costs something. Attention, emotional fuel, clarity. Most people spend that energy impulsively, then wonder why they feel exhausted, scattered, reactive. The composed individual guards it. They understand something simple but rare. You don't gain power by winning every exchange. You gain power by deciding which exchanges matter. Silence sharpens that decision. When you stop rushing to prove yourself, something changes. You begin to see conversations differently. You notice patterns, power dynamics, hidden intentions. You realize how often people argue to feel important, to feel seen, to feel superior. And once you see that, you stop feeding it. This is where self-mastery begins. Not in dominance over others, but dominance over your own impulses. Anyone can react. Few can restrain themselves. And restraint is not passive. It is active discipline. It is the ability to sit with discomfort without needing to dissolve it with words. It is the ability to let others misunderstand you without panicking. It is the ability to let silence do the work for you. Most people speak to control how they're perceived, the powerful focus on controlling how they respond. That shift changes your presence. People start leaning in when you speak because you don't speak often. Your words carry weight because they are rare. And when you do respond, it lands, not because it's loud, but because it's precise. This is the foundation. Before influence, before authority, before transformation. Control yourself, and the situation reshapes around you. In the next session, we'll go deeper, not just into why silence works, but how to use it without becoming passive, withdrawn, or invisible. Because silence alone isn't power. Timing is, and learning when to speak is just as important as knowing when not to. Silence alone does not make you powerful. Anyone can stop talking. Anyone can withdraw. Anyone can disappear. That isn't strength. Real power emerges when silence becomes intentional, when it's used not to escape tension, but to shape it. Most people misunderstand this. They hear, "be silent," and think it means becoming passive, agreeable, invisible. They think power requires presence, dominance, constant assertion, but influence doesn't come from occupying space. It comes from controlling it. Every interaction has an emotional current. Someone always leads it, consciously or not. The person who reacts follows. The person who decides the tempo leads. This is where silence transforms, not as absence, but as pressure. Think about pauses in conversation. An unexpected pause makes people uneasy. They rush to fill it. They explain more than they intended. They soften their stance. They contradict themselves. Silence creates imbalance, and imbalance shifts control. This is why interrogators don't talk much, why great negotiators don't rush, why the most persuasive figures often speak less than everyone else in the room. They allow silence to do the destabilizing. Words clarify, silence reveals. Most people reveal themselves without realizing it. Their tone changes, their posture tightens, their arguments become defensive, because silence removes their mirror. They don't know how they're being received, and uncertainty is uncomfortable. The disciplined mind understands this and doesn't rush to relieve that discomfort, not out of cruelty, but out of awareness. Silence forces honesty. Now here's the crucial distinction. Strategic silence is not emotional shutdown. It is not coldness. It is not indifference. It is presence without reaction. You are fully aware, fully engaged, but unmoved. That alone changes the dynamic. People expect feedback, approval, resistance. When they don't get it, they adjust. And whoever adjusts is no longer in control. This is why silence is most powerful when others expect you to speak, when they provoke, when they accuse, when they try to pull you into defense mode. That's the moment to pause, not to suppress emotion, but to let it pass without action, because emotion loses strength when it isn't fed. Most arguments don't need counter-arguments. They need space to collapse. But silence is not the final move. It's the setup. Eventually, you speak. And when you do, it must be deliberate, short, clear, unemotional, not to win, but to redirect. The mistake most people make is talking to prove. The powerful talk to position. There's a difference. Proving seeks validation. Positioning creates reality. Instead of explaining yourself, you define the frame. Instead of defending, you clarify terms. Instead of matching energy, you lower the temperature. And suddenly the conversation changes. People listen differently. Because your words aren't reactive, they're decisive. This is how silence and speech work together. Silence gathers information. Speech applies pressure. Used correctly, this combination makes you untouchable because you are no longer predictable. Predictability is weakness. When people know you'll react, they control you. When they don't, they hesitate. Hesitation creates openings. Now let's address the fear most people have. What if silence makes me seem weak? What if people think I have nothing to say? What if they misunderstand me? They will, and that's okay. Being misunderstood is not failure. It's often the cost of independence. People who need to be understood by everyone are easy to control. They explain too much, justify too often, reveal too much. The composed individual allows ambiguity. They don't rush to correct every false assumption, because not every misunderstanding deserves correction. Some misunderstandings protect you. They filter out people who demand access to your inner world without earning it. Silence creates boundaries without confrontation, and boundaries are power. Now, consider how this applies beyond arguments. In relationships, at work, in social settings, the person who always fills the silence becomes background noise. The person who chooses moments becomes memorable. Silence makes presence heavier. It slows time. It makes people lean forward. That's influence. But again, silence must be chosen. Silence born from fear feels different. It shrinks you. Strategic silence expands you. The difference is internal. One avoids, the other observes. One suppresses, the other contains. Containment is strength. Think of a calm body of water, still, unmoving, yet capable of overwhelming force. That's the image to hold. Not rigid, not tense, centered. This is why self-mastery always precedes external power. If you cannot sit with your own discomfort, silence will feel unbearable. If you cannot tolerate uncertainty, you will rush to speak. But once you train yourself to pause, truly pause, something changes. You stop being dragged into emotional currents. You stop arguing to protect ego. You stop wasting words. And when you finally speak, people feel it, because your words emerge from control, not compulsion. In the final session, we'll confront the last misunderstanding, because silence and restraint are not the end goal. They are tools. The real goal is mastery, knowing exactly when to step forward, when to strike, and when to let the moment collapse on its own. Because true power isn't quiet, it's precise, and precision comes from knowing when to act. There comes a point where silence is no longer just a tactic. It becomes a signal. People feel it before they understand it. You walk into a room and say very little, yet attention shifts. You respond slowly, yet others adjust quickly. You don't chase agreement, yet your presence changes the direction of the exchange. This is no longer about holding back. This is about commanding space without force. Most people think authority is asserted. It's not. Authority is recognized, and recognition comes from consistency. When your reactions are rare, measured, and intentional, people stop trying to provoke them. When your words are few but decisive, people wait for them. When you don't compete for attention, attention comes to you. This is the paradox most never grasp. Power doesn't announce itself, it settles. At this level, silence is no longer defensive or strategic. It becomes structural. You're no longer reacting to situations. Situations are reacting to you. This is where mastery shows itself. Not in confrontation, not in dominance, but in inevitability. Think about the people whose presence you respect most. They don't explain themselves constantly. They don't argue for their worth. They don't rush to correct others. They let outcomes speak, and outcomes are louder than words. At this stage, speaking becomes an act of finality. When you speak, something closes. A decision is made. A direction is set. There is no back and forth, because you've already observed enough to know where the line belongs. This is why true authority rarely debates. Debate implies uncertainty. Command implies clarity. But here's the crucial distinction. Command is not aggression, it's calm decisiveness. The ability to end conversations, not escalate them. To define boundaries, not defend them. To move on without explanation. Most people remain trapped in endless justification loops. They argue because they want approval. They explain because they fear rejection. They react because silence feels like loss. But silence, at this level, is not loss. It's closure. You don't need the last word. You don't need agreement. You don't need to be understood by everyone. Because your internal position is already settled. That internal settlement changes everything. People sense when someone is no longer available for manipulation, no longer emotionally hookable, no longer dependent on validation. And when they sense that, the dynamic shifts. They become careful, more respectful, less invasive, not because you demanded it, but because your presence enforces it. This is self-mastery in its final form. You're not silent because you have nothing to say. You are silent because everything that needs to be said has already been decided within you. That decision radiates outward, and when conflict does appear, because it always will, you meet it differently. You don't rush, you don't tense, you don't shrink or inflate. You assess, is this worth my energy? Does this sharpen or drain me? Does engaging here serve my direction or distract from it? If the answer is no, you disengage without guilt. If the answer is yes, you speak once, clearly, firmly, without excess, and then you stop, because repetition weakens authority. People who repeat themselves are negotiating. People who speak once are defining reality. This is why over-explaining erodes power. Every extra word is an opening. Silence closes doors. Now understand this deeply. This way of being is not about control over others. It is about control over yourself so complete that others adjust automatically. You don't need to intimidate. You don't need to dominate. You don't need to prove. Your restraint does the work. Your calm becomes the ceiling others can't rise above. And over time, something remarkable happens. You stop attracting unnecessary conflict. You stop being pulled into pointless debates. You stop bleeding energy into places that lead nowhere. Your life becomes quieter, but heavier. Fewer words, more impact. This is the economy of power, and it's rare. Because most people are addicted to reaction. They mistake intensity for meaning, noise for importance, movement for progress. But mastery is stillness with direction, silence with intention, action without waste. So the question becomes simple, not, should I speak or stay silent? But, does this moment deserve access to my voice? Because your voice is not free. It costs attention, It costs energy. It costs presence. Spend it where it matters. Let silence guard the rest. That is the discipline. That is the line between reacting and ruling. And once you cross it, you never argue the same way again. You don't need to. If this resonated with you, leave a comment with the word silence and tell me what this idea unlocked for you. I read them all.